Walter, let's start off a little bit by talking about the Great Year. A lot of people, and what I mean by that, I guess the procession. We were just talking about that before the show, and a lot of people don't quite understand what that is. And not only that, from my understanding and what I've been reading about your work, is that you have a different hypothesis as to the meanings of what the precession is compared to what popular astronomy and whatnot has been telling us. So, could you give us a little synopsis on what it is and what are the differences between what you're seeing and what we're being told by mainstream science?
Gladly, gladly. So, ancient cultures around the world spoke of this vast cycle of time with alternating dark and golden ages. And Plato called it the Great Year. But different cultures had different names for it. The Indian culture called the Yugas and broke it into the Kali, Dwapara, Treta, and Satya Yugas. The Satya Yuga would be their golden age. Versus, I think most of us are familiar with the way the Greeks broke down the cycle into the iron, bronze, silver, and golden age. Right. And but we find it in over 30 ancient cultures, and there's been quite a bit of study and documentation of this. And so it's actually a concept, this precessional cycle that's, very long. It's measured anywhere from 24 to 26,000 years, depending on who you talk to. That was better known in ancient times than it is today. Today wow. It's considered to be some obscure celestial mechanic wobbling of the earth. And you're right, I do have a different take on it, and I would say, it's really not my own take. It's a take that from the work of Swami Sri Yukteswar. He was the guru of Paramahansa Yogananda, a pretty well-known guy who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi. And Sri Yukteswar wrote a book back in 1894 called The Holy Science. And in there, he's talking about the enlightenment process and how one goes from sort of ignorance to enlightenment. And it just in the passing, in the introduction of the book, he makes a very quick reference to precession with the setup that the reason we don't understand these things right now is because we're in a very low age. And the reason we're in a low age is because the current position of our solar system relative to another star is very distant, and that has an effect on us. And so here's a good analogy, way to look at it. Just as the Earth spins on its axis, and it gives you the cycles of night and day every 24 hours, of course, and dramatic things happen during that period of time because our bodies are adapted to light. And, photosynthesis occurs when there's light. And so the whole planet sort of wakes up on the light side and it's very active and busy. And it slowly goes to sleep on the dark side when very little happens. And then likewise, when the Earth orbits the sun, takes 365 days, the same phenomena happens. Things spring out of the ground, bloom, give their fruit, and then decay again. It affects trillions and trillions of life forms. Other larger life forms will migrate or spawn en masse, and it just affects the whole Earth. So these two basic celestial cycles, the spinning Earth and the Earth orbiting the sun, affect all life, but it's so common that we hardly even think about it. So where we get to precession is the ancients taught that there was a third motion, the precession of the equinox. And indeed, Copernicus, sort of the first modern astronomers, since the Renaissance, the rebirth of the Dark Age, if you will, the rebirth of the cycle since the Dark Age, he says he taught us about the first motion of the Earth. It spins on its axis. That's why we see the stars and the sun rise in the east and set in the west. It's not that they're all moving around us. It's that we, the Earth, are spinning. And obviously that's well accepted now. And the second motion, he said, it's the whole Earth going around the sun. And that's why you have a different constellation of the zodiac overhead each month, roughly.
Right.
And it's sort of just a way to tell time where you are in the year by looking up at the night sky. But when it came to precession, he said it was due to libration, a wobbling of the Earth. And so he got 2 out of 3 of them right. And there was Newton who said, well, if the Earth wobbles, it must be due to the gravity of the sun and the moon tugging on the oblate Earth. And sure enough, there is a little wobble that goes on there. It's we now call it nutation. When the moon is above the equator of the Earth, it will tug the Earth a little bit in that direction. And when it's below the equator of the Earth, it tugs the Earth a little bit in that direction. And that is often confused in many people's minds with precession, but it wasn't really discovered, nutation, till 100 years after this precession theory was formed by Newton. And so all the causes and forces that Newton had already applied to precession now were kind of being used to explain nutation. And precession became this obscure study. And let me just explain what it is sort of in layman's terms, how one can observe it, because it's easy to observe the Earth spinning, stars going around us, and the Earth orbiting. With precession, if you look on the equinox at the fixed stars in the background of the sun, say right before the sun is rising, you will see a certain constellation. And if you look 4,000 years ago, you'd see Aries on the spring equinox. And sun slowly moves through that equinox or at that constellation at the rate of about 2,000 years. Mm-hmm. So 2,000 years ago, you would have then seen Pisces in the background. And now we're very close to the cusp between Pisces and Aquarius. So there's even the 60s song about it. We're at the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And so that's how you can visually observe precession. But it is so slow, only moving 1 degree across the sky in a typical lifetime, that nobody can really notice it. And yet every ancient culture seemed to be aware of it. So it was very important to them.